King crabs were not originally found on the European coast. They were introduced here. They appeared in the north of Norway towards the end of the 70s. In just a few decades, they have conquered the northern European Arctic coast. How far will the giant crabs expand their territory? Should we be worried? Scientists are continuing to discover the resources and adaptability of this crustacean invader.
They are evolutionarily very successful.
Their leg span can reach up to 180 centimeters, and they can weigh up to 10 kilograms. The king crab is one of the largest shellfish in the underwater world. They are also called red king crabs. Their scientific name is Paralithodes kamchatkas. This is Latin for stone crab that comes from Kamchatka, the peninsula in the Russian Far East. Marine biologists started to worry when the crabs were found in Norwegian waters at the end of the 70s.
I remember one time I was diving and I saw a king crab that was eating bivalve, and I got closer to the crab, and suddenly it just raises up on the back legs and having the claws right in the up in the water, and I was so scared. So I went back and started to get another way away from the crab. So it's really frightening.
The water is very cold and highly oxygenated. The Arctic seas have a rich biodiversity. Over 4,000 species have been discovered in the Barents Sea, more than in any other of the Arctic seas. This inventory is far from complete. Like all polar systems, the Barents Sea Arctic ecosystem is characterized by high biological productivity and home to many rare species. The ecosystem is very rich, but also very fragile, and not strong enough to withstand a predator as powerful as the giant crab. The king crab is continuing to thrive in this hitherto preserved environment and is depopulating the seabed. This is resulting in a change in the balance of the species. The king crab has an insatiable appetite. It's an omnivore, and it devours all prey that comes within its reach. Bugness Port has 200 inhabitants. It is 500 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle and is dependent on its cod and salmon trade. It's one of the first villages in Norway where the king crabs appeared. The first catch in 1977 caused a commotion. The public was curious as well as scared. The fishermen who caught the first king crabs were proud of their catch, but they didn't know what to think of these unusual crabs. How did the crabs come to Norway? At the beginning of the last century, they were only found in the North Pacific. Americans, Japanese, and Russians fished and sold king crabs. King crab sells for a good price, and the export trade is successful. Stalin, and then Khrushchev, was convinced that this miraculous crab would help to feed people on the shores of European Russia. Yuri Orlov, a Soviet scientist, embarked on a project in 1961. Orlov captured crabs that lived on the Kamchatka coast. His aim was to move them to the other side of the continent. Orlov tried out different types of transport: helicopters, planes, trains. He took thousands of crabs through Siberia. They traveled from Vladivostok to Murmansk, a journey of more than 10,000 kilometers. Many crabs perished during the journey. Orlov didn't give up until he had achieved what he had set out to do. In the late 60s, a selection of fertilized females arrived safely at their destination. They were placed in the water 6 miles from Murmansk in the Kola Gulf, where it opens up into the Barents Sea. The king crabs multiplied quickly. By the end of the 70s, they had colonized the Russian waters and moved into Norway. They followed the northern coast of Scandinavia and descended towards the south. In 2009, a king crab was caught in Bergen. The king crabs should have been deterred by the warmer waters as they headed southwards. However, they moved on to colonize the northern fjords. The maze of steep and plunging cliffs does not discourage the king crab. This concerns Liz Lindahl, the senior marine biologist at the Institute of Marine Research in Norway.
So I was here also for several years ago, before the king crab came into the inner parts of the fjord. So this is the reference point. And as you have told me, now the king crab has come. And we need to look how it looked like now. And we compare it to what it was before.
Yes. Just help me here. So, now we are approximately here.
So this is the places where we are a bit afraid that there might be too much king crab, and that had maybe a very big impact on the Arctic fauna.
Yeah, because this is fauna here is the same as you find in the Spitsbergen area.
Yeah, and all the way up in the Barents
And
Sea.
if it's removed from here, we don't know where it can be replaced from.
It is still unknown whether the king crab has fully colonized the Porsanger fjord or if some areas remain unaffected. Crabs move quickly and are difficult to locate.
So how deep is it here?
We are approaching now this the location where we expect to find some crabs, and here's probably some small fishes.
You can't detect them using a sonar device. The only way to know where they are is to dive in and look for indications.
I would like to see on the bottom animals if we find any fingerprints from the king crab.
Yes.
So if there are any bivalves that is crushed,
Yes.
or in the sea stars that are missing arms.
Yes.
That's what I'm want to look for.
Okay.
You can't always see the king crabs under the marine vegetation. There are definitely king crabs in the Porsanger Fjord, but it's difficult to say how many exactly. So the divers collect traces of their eating to establish the density of their colony. Biologists examined discarded shells in order to determine whether the predator was a crab rather than a seal or a seabird. In certain places, the seabed is covered with shell remains. The wildlife that is usually present here has disappeared. The crabs roam the almost deserted seabed in search of any remaining prey. It's more than likely that they are responsible for this carnage. This is a standard-sized male king crab. The biologists are taking it to a laboratory to study its predatory habits. Lise's fears have been realized. During the last 10 years, the crabs have come to Porsanger, a fjord that travels more than 60 miles inland, and have settled almost everywhere. The next step is to evaluate the impact of the king crab on marine life. Their claws are long and agile. Their function is not just mechanical. They're extremely sophisticated, and they enable the crabs to locate their prey. Underneath its prickly shell, the king crab hides a network of highly sensitive sensors along its legs. They send a stream of information to the brain. Touch-sensitive hair is located on the ends of its claws and can detect shells that are buried in the sand. It captures and manipulates its victims with menacing skill. It has small, agile fingers on the side of its mouths. It is covered with tactile hairs that determine the taste and suitability of its prey. If it's okay to eat, the crab moves the food towards its mouth. The crab uses its mandible to crack the shell into pieces and tear the flesh apart before swallowing it. The biologists look at the unedited images.
The king crab and the sea anemone is eating aggressively the medusa here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And
It's
it's not even affected at all by these sting cells.
No, it even takes it right into the mouth.
Yeah, and it looks actually, I find it tasty.
Yeah.
The young crab has caught a jellyfish and doesn't seem to be affected by its sting.
are really fighting for them as something,
Yeah.
as a treat.
That's
It seems
amazing.
like the king crab is winning. He can even taking out of the sea animals.
Dragging it out of the
Yeah.
mouth, yeah. So it's a really aggressive predator.
He's really competitive in this new habitat.
Yes.
So they get easily through their defense mechanisms. So
Yeah,
it's-
through thousands of years, these species have adapted to their environment, but suddenly a new invasive is coming in, and they are harmless. They cannot protect themselves for this kind of predation.
Lise visits a study center near the city of Tromsø in order to learn more about the king crab's diet. She is attempting to measure the amount of food that each crab consumes on a daily basis in order to estimate the damage that a crab colony can cause in a fjord. Lise distributes prey to the captive crabs. The prey has been counted.
This investigation is very important because we need to know what it is eating, what size of prey it is eating, and also how fast it is eating. Because without this, we will not be able to make any calculation about how fast the nature environment will change in future. So this is a very important experiment.
The experiment takes place at night. This is the period of maximum activity for the king crab. They are filmed for 12 hours. The crabs start by attacking the starfish. They have soft flesh and are easy to catch. They then start devouring the sea urchins. The crabs easily pierce their armor in spite of their spines.
Now I am curious what has happened during the night. So I see that it seems as everybody has been eating at least one sea urchin and one sea star. And extrapolating this to the nature, we will see that for each king crab per day they will remove prey or two prey. So that will make a difference if the population of king crab becomes big enough.
By eliminating certain prey, such as the starfish, and by sparing the larger prey, such as the bivalves, the king crabs have created an imbalance in the ecosystem and consequently have caused a loss of biodiversity. The king crab does not only use its claws to search for food. It also has remote sensors that allow it to locate prey that is out of sight. These antennas are the equivalent of the nose. They constantly sweep the area in search for prey. They have ultra-sensitive sensors that are able to detect more than 400 different molecular odors. The crab lurks on full alert in the hunting area. It has detected prey using its antennae. It comes across a sea urchin. It cracks the shell open in just a few seconds. The shell gives the crab the calcium it needs to strengthen its own shell. The sudden arrival of this insatiable predator in the hitherto untouched fjords has endangered the entire food chain. It is essential that the scientists discover more about the king crab and the way in which it is colonizing the coasts and the fjords. Jan Sundhed, a biologist at the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, is studying their movement.
We attach this to the single crab and release the crab in an area, and then we put some buoys to what we call receivers, acoustic receivers, that actually can detect these small tagging signals or tag signals from each individual crab. Put it here on the leg on the crab, so each of these 25 crabs were actually carrying one of these. And the frequency of these tags were so particular that we can identify each crab. So we can say crab number 14 went from there to there, and so on. What the experiment showed us was that the crab moves all the time. It doesn't sit still at any time. It's continuously moving.
The king crab is always on the move. It is continually exploring new areas. It surmounts obstacles with ease. The uneven depth of the fjords and the temperature of the water is perfect for the king crab. Some of them settle permanently in the fjords. Their sedentary presence leaves little chance for marine life to regenerate. Unlike most other crabs that move laterally, the king crab can walk forward at a rapid pace and can travel up to 6 miles per day. By tracking crabs that have been equipped with tags, scientists discovered that they could move into the deeper fjords, some more than 200 fathoms deep. This is surprising given that the seabed is empty at such depths, at least in appearance. There is an abundance of wildlife in the mud that is produced by the decomposition of surface organisms. The king crabs are aware of these hidden resources. They burrow their long fingers into the sludge and devour everything they find. Tiny organisms inhabit the sedimentary sludge. The king crabs like to consume them. Since the creatures are small, the crabs need to excavate large areas to consume large amounts.
But in the deepest basin, we also have sediment or sand. And inside that, we have a lot of worms, bivalves, and tiny small crustaceans. So they also have a much higher regeneration time or productivity than if we compare this biomass with the sea stars and sea urchins and big prawns that we find in the Arctic basins.
The sludge is at the bottom of the food chain. Worms and other tiny organisms play an important role in the recycling of organic matter and oxygen. If they disappear, the seabed will become sterile and the entire food chain will be weakened. The biologists fear that crabs will reach particularly fragile areas that are home to rare marine organisms and relics of the last ice age. Jan Sundet and his colleagues from the University of Tromsø are on an observation ship. They are situated at the far end of the Porsanger Fjord. It's not yet known if the crabs have reached this area. A camera has been submerged underwater to film the seabed. The water is 4 degrees and it is 17 meters deep. Suddenly, the camera captures something remarkable. There are so many crabs that the seabed is barely visible. What has caused them to gather together? It looks like it's a group of young crabs. Scientists believe that the young crabs form large and compact groups in order to deter predators. These group formations could also be a phase of socialization. Jan takes a closer look and discovers something else. The group leaves behind countless empty shells. They have shed their external skeletons that have become too small for them during a period of growth. A steroid hormone secretion causes the obsolete shell to crack open. The new shell is still soft. This means that the crabs are extremely vulnerable, and this is perhaps the reason that they shed their shells in groups and form a colony. Fully grown king crabs molt less frequently. This rebirth cycle allows them to regenerate and strengthen their shells. The number of predators of the king crabs decreases once they are fully grown, because their shells have become strong enough to protect against attacks. The wolffish has spectacular canine-like teeth and is called the boot eater by fishermen, but it's not big enough to take on a king crab. The snake-headed fish can measure 5 feet and weigh 30 pounds. It shares more or less the same prey as the king crab and does not appreciate the new competition on its territory. This king crab has seen its rival and shows its white undershell in an attempt to intimidate it. If the wolffish attacks the crab, it can rely on its natural armor. The crab's shell withstands its opponent's teeth, even if it loses a leg or two. The wound is immediately covered with a protective membrane that prevents it from bleeding. A stub quickly forms. It will then develop into a new leg. The leg will eventually grow back completely. However, regrowth takes time because the leg develops when the crab sheds its shell. Many of the king crabs are lame, but they still survive. They show extraordinary resilience. This remarkable resistance is also combined with a tremendous capacity for reproduction. Scientists have studied their reproduction habits in depth. They have found that females prefer to mate with large males. The life expectancy of the king crab is 20 to 30 years. They become adults when they are between 4 and 7 years old. Biologists examine the proportion of large males and females of reproductive age in order to predict the growth of a colony. The breeding season begins in spring. It is an essential stage in the life cycle of a king crab. Females emit pheromones that attract males, who in turn respond to this mating call. The male takes hold of the female and carries her. The male and female remain closely entwined for 2 weeks. Neither of them feed until the female is ready to be fertilized. As with other crab species, they store their eggs inside their shells. However, the female king crabs keep their eggs for a long period, approximately a year, to ensure good maturation. Immediately after hatching, up to 400,000 larvae disperse throughout the water. Currents carry them for miles on end, and they survive despite the large temperature differences. It is springtime. The larvae take advantage of plankton bloom to feed and start their growth. They move slowly and have to hide from the countless predators that are ready to pounce on them. The surviving larvae begin a series of transformations before they reach their final form. The larvae become small crabs. The king crab appears to be an invincible conqueror. Only one species seems able to overcome this creature that is taking over the Norwegian waters: humans. In many Finnmark villages like Bugnes, the fishermen have quickly realized that the invasion of king crabs represents an opportunity.
Begin like a problem, because the king crab first species, when they came, they went into the cod nets and disturbed the fishing of cod. And me and another guy, we was running a fish factory, mostly for salmon and cod. So we have to help the fishermen to finance the problem. But then when we saw the king crab, more and more came in the nets, we also saw, of course, that this is can be exclusive meat. Some years ago, I took the value of king crab, the landings from the fishermen. It was 100 million Norwegian kroner, and 60% of those was created in small villages like Bugnes, with 200 people, more or less. So king crab is a blessing to small places that have not so many options regarding creating working places and industry.
The Norwegian fishermen have started crab fishing, but unlike in Kamchatka and Alaska in the 20th century, they have not built factory ships. They have simply adapted their equipment for king crab fishing, and they work on small boats that are less than 15 meters long and enable them to fish at sea or in the fjords.
The first time we fishing was in 1993. Then we begin, and we was 4 boats in 1993, and now we are 500.
The Ministry of Fisheries has imposed fishing limits. They do not want to exhaust this new resource and have imposed quotas in order to preserve the stock. In a way, the fishermen have become allies to the crab invaders.
As far as I know, no examples around the world that people are fishing on introduced species. Mainly, the management goals of introduced species is that to get rid of it as soon as possible. But in Norway, we have actually said that we want to keep it in a certain geographical area. Outside this area, we want to get rid of it. So it's actually 2 different management goals, which are actually contradictory.
Regulations require Norwegian fishermen to put females back in the water if they are carrying eggs. In the end, public opinion in Norway is divided. Biodiversity experts want to eliminate the crabs, whilst fishermen want to keep them in the area. The Norwegian fishermen are prolonging the idea the Russians had of using nature for their own economic gain. They're not the only ones. In the North Pacific, in the region where the king crab originates from, people are pursuing the same goals. The crab population here in Alaska has drastically declined since the 80s, when it became a victim of overfishing. Laboratories in the ARTE crab program are working to reconstitute settlements of several species of king crabs on the North American coast. Scientists hope that their studies will enable commercial fishing to resume.
These Glaucothoe are looking really healthy. I'm very proud of all the research that we've accomplished here at the hatchery. We feel like we've overcome the hurdle of culturing the larvae to the juvenile stage. And these Glaucothoe they're looking very healthy, and several months from now we'll hopefully be releasing them back into the wild at some point in the near future. The idea with this stock enhancement project is that we would be culturing the juvenile to increase natural survival of the larvae to overcome some of these population bottlenecks at the early life history stages. And so sort of man interfering and improving that population bottleneck is sort of a strategy to try to get some of these depressed populations to increase in numbers.
Before releasing the crabs bred in captivity, scientists ensure that they will not impoverish the genetic stock of wild crabs or transmit any diseases to them. Is this the miracle solution that the Alaskan fishermen are hoping for? Ultimately, nature will decide.
Yeah, I look out at the ocean and I think it might be nice to release crabs into Resurrection Bay someday. I can imagine them released into the ocean and spreading out and really thriving here.
The king crab is opportunistic and resourceful. Its reign is far from over, and its many skills are yet to be revealed. The king crab prefers cool waters. Scientists are hoping to anticipate its future distribution by studying its ability to withstand higher temperatures out of the Arctic seas or due to global warming.
The crabs, as all other kind of animals, they are optimizing their behavior dependent on the environmental conditions in this area. So maybe the future king crab in this area will actually be able to tolerate higher temperatures than we have seen in the Bering Sea. For instance, we have done some study on the larvae, and we have got some surprising results showing that the larvae are able to survive much higher temperatures than we expected regarding the studies that have been carried out in the Bering Sea. Maybe temperature up to 18-20 degrees, and which is much, much higher than we expected.
Yuri Orlov, the man who brought the king crabs to the North Atlantic, was convinced that they would be transported either by fishermen or as larvae traveling in ship ballasts, and would colonize the coast right up to Gibraltar. This would mean that they are able to travel through the warmest waters in Europe, like here in the English Channel. This might not be possible.
The temperatures here in early June do already exceed 13 degrees water temperature, which is the maximum king crab species, or at least some of them, can survive. We may find them up in Scotland, and they are obviously species along Norway, but in the light of global warming, it is even more unlikely that they spread further south. Oh, here we have a marvelous specimen.
The king crab, therefore, has a higher chance of survival and expansion in the polar regions. It's possible that they could cross the deep ocean waters that separate two continental fringes. What depths can a king crab survive in? This is what Sven wants to find out. The crab is placed in a pressurized chamber. A probe is used to measure its heartbeat. Its cardiac rhythm indicates its resistance. increasing pressure simulates a descent into an abyss.
30.
Still no change in heartbeat frequency.
35. 85.
Yes, I think we are passing a threshold slowly. The heartbeat is starting to slow down again.
So at 120.
Which is equivalent of 1,200 meters water depth. It's pretty significant.
Increasing to 125 bar. So that's 125 bar, 1,250 meters water depth. Do you think this crab can survive any more pressure?
I really think we should stop now because the respiration rate is going down.
Okay, we reduce pressure.
It's very active. So it did really survive this pressure treatment well. No damages. This is a very shallow water king crab and it would probably do well up to 1,000 meters water depth. So this would not enable it to cross the deep ocean abyss, but it could move along ocean ridges, which are often considered to be highways through the deep sea or the outer continental margins. They know how to survive. They have colonized the oceans globally where they're cold enough. So they are evolutionarily very successful.
With such extraordinary capacities, the future of the king crab is wide open. Its resistance to low temperatures and deep waters and its capacity for adaptation has enabled it to exist throughout millions of years of evolution, during which the climate changes have been severe and numerous. Whatever happens, it will always find an area in the sea where it can take refuge, and if conditions are favorable, it will proliferate. An area of the sea where ice is melting, where water is slightly above 0 degrees, is an ideal condition for this king of the sea. The future of the king crab continues to be determined by humans, but we by no means control its evolution.